Where is China going? We now have a roadmap. It's called the 13th Five-Year Plan, and it gives national guidelines for China's development over the next 5 years from 2016 to 2020, which is the target date for the first of China's grand goals, the realization of a moderately prosperous society, which is the first of President Xi's 4 comprehensives and the first part of the Chinese dream. The next 5 years will be critical. China is facing a host of problems: slowing economy, sluggish global demand, overcapacity in heavy industry, outdated low-end manufacturing, stagnant labor force, an increasingly unequal society, an increasingly polluted country, increasing local debt, and more. How does China's 13th Five-Year Plan address these issues? How does the plan reflect how China's leaders think about China's problems? What are the big ideas? What are the key policies? We sit down with experts who took part in preparing the 13th Five-Year Plan, getting us closer to China.
The year 2020 is the target date to achieve China's goal of building a moderately prosperous society, which is the first part of the Chinese dream. Now China has a roadmap to get there. It's called the 13th Five-Year Plan, and it runs from 2016 to 2020. The Communist Party of China released a draft of this plan after the 5th plenary session of the 18th CPC Central Committee. The draft highlights innovation, coordination, green growth, opening up, and inclusive development as the new ideas of development in the next 5 years. At a press conference held by the State Council Information Office, Xu Xiaoshi, the director of the National Development and Reform Commission, explained some of the issues and policies for the next 5 years' development.
“十三五”期间，在新常态下，我们国家面临的最大的挑战，就是要跨越中等收入陷阱。那么，它根本的出路就在于创新发展。
If China is to achieve the target set in its 13th Five-Year Plan, the GDP will grow at around 6.5% annually. The population living in poverty will be reduced by 70 million. Annual income per capita will reach $12,600, double its level in 2010. 25 million jobs will be created each year. More education resources will be allocated to rural areas. Carbon emissions relative to GDP will be reduced by 40 to 50% from 2005 levels.
The moderately prosperous society is the first major goal that China has set. From the 5th plenum, it's the first of President Xi Jinping's 4 comprehensives. Let's talk specifically what that means, both qualitatively and quantitatively.
应该说，首先是一个
First, development. That is, we aim to raise people's income by a large margin. According to the goal set, we strive to double the 2010 per capita income by 2020, reaching a level of somewhere above $10,000 per person. So this is one. Second, in this 5th plenum of the 18th CPC Central Committee, we put forth the concept of green and inclusive development, which targets the phenomena of unbalanced development, which is actually about poverty alleviation, to eliminate all counties below the poverty line. So this is the second goal, to narrow the gap between the rich and the poor. The third is about promoting environmental protection, about green development. We need to improve our environment, properly address all sorts of pollution, including air pollution, water pollution, etc. Some leapfrog development needs to be achieved. The fourth, in my understanding, is to advocate equal opportunities for education. Such fairness should be reflected in equal access to public services, where prominent changes need to be made in terms of social security. Particularly, we aim to fulfill the 3 goals each concerning 100 million people.
The objective of the plan is the 4 comprehensives put forward by President Xi: comprehensively building an overall moderately well-off society, comprehensively deepening reform, comprehensively governing the society in accordance with the law, and comprehensively supervising the Communist Party of China. Comprehensively building an overall moderately well-off society is an important policy objective which was clearly identified in the new plan. I think in this sense, especially including the inclusive development in the 5 new ideas about development, the 13th five-year plan may be a watershed in China's development.
In any economic development, there are always competing interests. Everything doesn't go in the same direction. So if we have growth rate on the one hand, restructuring of industry, rebalancing of the country between east and west, rural and urban, pollution control, poverty reduction, each of these elements as targets pull in different directions. So how do you articulate and optimize all of these different objectives?
An important idea put forth through the 5th plenum is coordinated development, which calls for some systematic deployment taking a holistic view. Let's say with an overheated economy, our environment may suffer. In that way, our focus has also changed from the past single-sided extensive development model that is factor-driven and investment-boosted. The model was actually outdated. What we need next is a development model that is innovation-driven, which can lay a solid foundation for our sustainable development over the next 5 years or even longer into the future.
20 years ago in 1995, when we decided to develop a market economy, we planned to make a transition from a plan to market economy. Now the transition to a market economy has been basically completed, but the transition from an extensive to an intensive economic growth mode has become an urgent task.
That sounds very good as a government directive and guideline, but how does it literally happen?
I think the government's function is to create a level playing field in the market. That is, according to the decision made at the 3rd plenum of the 18th CPC Central Committee, to establish and improve the market economy system, allowing the market to play a decisive role in resource allocation, while at the same time the government also fulfills its due function.
Demographics are obviously important, and as China is changing, people are now focusing on demographics. So one element of this, obviously, is what got all the headlines from the 5th plenum, which is the relaxation of the one-child policy further. So now all couples can have 2 children. What's the significance in terms of China's demographics and in terms of the developing economy of the decision to allow 2 children per family?
I think the positive impact outweighs negative. In the short term, there will be no shocks from a baby boom, but we can look to 20 years from now when we enter the aging society. Now that we have eased the family planning policy, we'll have more kids grown to adulthood and entering the labor market at that time, so the change of our policy will actually boost economic development. In the meanwhile, we should be aware that while in the past we suffered the disadvantages of single child per family, where healthy growth of the kids was affected to a certain extent, we're now losing our demographic dividend, and an aging society is just around the corner. It is high time we adjust our policy to boost the development of our service industry, industrial development. Therefore, I believe our policy adjustment at this time is a piece of good news to the world economy as well.
From emerging powers to expanding partnerships, from fighting poverty to combating climate change, booming economies, war-ravaged nations, and everything in between. We capture the changes affecting the most dynamic and diverse continent on the planet, taking you beyond the headlines to the people and their stories. Asia Today, delivering Asia to the world.
Innovation has long been an objective of the Chinese government, but the 13th five-year plan, which begins in January of 2016, elevates innovation to really the core of its whole way of thinking. How will that be different in the future?
“13.5” 是把创新作为首要的位置，这样就我们中国的主要的产业。再通过我们把创新放在首位，创新驱动发展，来在未来发展中，我们主导的产业若干产业，第一，我们要做到核心技术，大部分核心技术，我们不是依靠课外，靠自己创造。另外呢，我们还要出现更多的技术，是引领世界未来发展的方向。
Innovation is elevated to a core position in China's 13th five-year plan. All economic sectors are encouraged to develop new ideas, even farming. Agriculture in China is usually regarded as requiring hard labor rather than modern technologies, but this is changing rapidly. Jinjin is a farmer in northeast China's Jilin province. The winter is freezing and it affects his crops. Now he gets an email from the Meteorology Administration. Here it says that it will be even colder this weekend.
现在挺着急的，赶着那个降温之前把粮食全部收完。
3 years ago in the fall, because of a sudden snowstorm, farmer Jin's farm lost tens of thousands of dollars, a huge sum for him.
最后真没办法，剩下的50%就扔在地上了。
Since then, the local agricultural bureau has worked with the weather agency to send weather alerts to the farmers. This year, Jinjong contracts more than 60 hectares of paddy fields. With the help of big data, he knows what kind of fertilizer and how much fertilizer he should use. He just turns on the location service on his mobile phone.
缺什么尾数，我们就给他们补什么尾数，对我们产量提高有很大的帮助。
Sun Zhengfeng also works on the farm in Jilin province. His main crop is maize. During breaks, Sun Zhengfeng takes a quick look at his cell phone to check out the food prices, which is a top priority for him.
现在苞米价降如果是7毛，我可以达到就是8毛的时候结算。
4 years ago, Sun entrusted his 3 hectares maize fields to the village cooperative. The cooperative has a standardized process from seed breeding to harvesting. Now the only thing Sun has to worry about is operating the harvest machines for the cooperative.
为合作社去管理这块土地，一个是能够提高土地的产出，另外一个通过科学管理，再加上全程机械化，这样减少了成本。
The cooperative that Sun joined in operates more than 500 hectares of fields from 384 families. With continuous intensive management, the cooperative has managed to reduce the cost of maize to 800 yuan per hectare and increase the production to 4,000 kilograms per hectare. Not only in agriculture, innovation is giving momentum to develop in many other areas in China. The country has already made strides with some of the world's most innovative companies, including Huawei and ZTE in telecoms, and web groups Alibaba, Baidu, and Tencent. The consulting firm McKinsey said that in 2014, China spent nearly $200 billion on research and development, the global number 2 in absolute terms, and about 2% of gross domestic product. Meanwhile, China's economic restructuring is also underway. China's economic growth used to rely heavily on trade and investment. Now private consumption is catching up. Studies show that China's service sector grew at 8.4% in the first half of 2015, far surpassing the 6.1% growth in manufacturing and construction.
What are some of the specific obstacles that have been in the way in the past for innovation, regulation or financing, that you're now reducing or eliminating?
我认为，比较重要的呢是3个，一个呢是垄断，垄断呢影响创新；第二个是关于资金的问题，资金的问题呢，就是因为很多的创业者，尤其是搞软件的，他这个东西是没有办法贷款的，是无形的。这个呢，对于这个银行也好，一些金融机构也好，很难就是说评估它的这个价值与价格，就是要给他贷款的话，也不符合我们银行的规则。第3个就是知识产权的问题。过去我们长期以来呢，我们的文化就是大家都互相学，抄的现象是存在的。但是近10年来说，我们基本上大为改观。
What's the relative role for government and the private sector and the market in developing innovation as the core of China's development?
作为政府来说，不能越位、错位或者不到位，就是该是市场的你不能管，就是要奉从管制；该你服务的你不能缺位。比如说法规的制定，这个环境的改善，基础设施、环境，这些东西，交通，这个医疗，你要保障。创新怎么创，有创新者说了算。不是去布置任务，你给我创这个创那个，所以这个呢非常重要。但现在我们发现这个有的地方呢，它到了。
It is said that the Chinese educational system turns out very good students to take tests and to be very accurate reproducers of the past, but lacks creativity and innovation. That being the case, how do you then stimulate the way of thinking of innovation in the new generation of entrepreneurs in science and technology?
我到一个中学去调查，发现呢，小孩啊，他都不怎么喜欢提问题，都是在忙着背书。这个如果不提问题，光去背书的话呢，他就影响到了他的创新的意识的培养。光是这个把那个知识掌握了，这还不等于掌握了创新能力。而我曾经请教过钱学森先生，他认为讨论在学校里非常重要，对于培养问题非常的重要。讨论、争论、提问题可以使不懂到懂，而且给讨论问题是培养人才最好的一个方法。
One of the main characteristics of innovation is failure. You have to be able to fail in order to really be innovative. If you never fail, it means that you're not being innovative, or your innovations, you don't have enough ideas, or your ideas are not bold enough. But Chinese society in general, and perhaps Chinese government in particular, have paid a high price for failure in terms of people's career. How can you shift mentality in the future to encourage innovation by being not only more tolerant of failure, but being appreciative of failure being part of the innovative process?
硅谷有一个创业家告诉我，他认为成功者是很难谈经验的，因为成功它很多的因素，成功以后对于成功者他并不知道他，一般来说成功者不知道他怎么成功的，而且成功以后呢，他都头脑发热，觉得我成功了，他讲那个呀，很难说对你有很大的作用。相反的，失败之后，他可以总结出一些真挚的拙见，看到问题的实质。中国的对这个成功者过度的追捧，就是一个谁成功以后啊，这个社会就给他捧的就比较高，而且呢，就是就什么都有了。而对于这个失败者呢，缺少容忍，关心不够。
Uncovering the truth.
We are on our way to Liari, one of the most dangerous districts in the city of Karachi.
We were told that we're just about to cross the border between Malaysia and the Philippines.
Going the distance to get the story. we meet the real people with real hope.
For many young Thais, Muay Thai is one of the only ways to lift their families out of poverty.
Behind every corner is a great story. Assignment Asia. Expect the unexpected.
Culture Express. See the world in color.
Meet China's decision makers and thought leaders. See them in action, hear their views, debate their policies. Meet China's leaders with me. I'm Robert Lawrence Kuhn.
Green development is one of the highlights of the 13th Five-Year Plan. Pollution of air, water, and soil has become a severe problem that the Chinese government must address. For the first time, the Communist Party of China has put ecological system building as a main goal in its 5-year plan.
当前长期积累的大气、水、土壤污染的问题，在我们国家呢还比较突出。人民群众对改善生态环境的呼声也比较强烈。所以“十三五”期间，我们必须坚持节约资源和保护环境的基本国策。
Earlier in 2015, the State Council also released plans to promote ecological progress. The document laid out ideas to build a beautiful China by solving serious ecological and environmental problems, and by defining a new relationship between humankind and nature.
自然资源啊，它是有价值的啊。你如果保护自然、保护生态环境，就是一个增值自然价值的一个过程，也是一个增加自然资本的一个过程。 那所以啊，你干这种事儿，保护生态环境，它就是发展啊，跟其他的去生产农产品、工业品，它是一样的。既然是有价的，所以使用者必须付费，然后所有者必须收费。
The plan outlines a framework comprised of 8 systems for promoting ecological progress that will be established by 2020, including a system of property rights for natural resource assets and a system for evaluating officials' performance.
Dr. Gao, the extent of pollution in China, air, water, ground, is a constant conversation in China and internationally. What are the facts? How bad really is pollution in China?
客观的来讲，首先要承认，中国的现在环境污染。
To be fair, we must first recognize the fact that pollution in China is rather serious today. But through the historic lens, China went through industrialization in a fairly short period of time to fulfill what takes advanced countries 100 or even 200 years in just 2 or 3 decades. Such huge intensity of development naturally generates a lot of pollution. In terms of our pollution per capita GDP, we have taken proper measures for pollution control thanks to technology advancement. Pollutants out of per capita GDP are not the highest in the world's history. Then, horizontally compared with other developing countries at a similar development stage, we're actually a lighter polluter in a certain sense.
It's said that the problem of pollution in China is not one of proper law, because the laws are there. It's a question of compliance. There are stories told where corporations would have people to tell them when the regulator is going to come out so they could turn on the anti-pollution equipment, and as soon as they leave, they turn it off. Are those anecdotal stories, or is there some systemic problem?
There are comments that say that in China, violation of the environmental protection law is the norm. Well, it is very difficult to quantify the percentage of violations. But a scholar named Sun Youhai did an analysis and said that with strict compliance to the law, pollutants in China can be brought down by 40 to 60%. Using another way of calculation, the figure could be more than 50%.
Isn't there a behavioral structural incentive not to obey the polluting laws because everybody's judged by how much their local economy is growing from a GDP or from a company point of view what their profits are?
Leaders fail to see the importance of coordinated development between the economy and the environment. They fail to see the importance. Now, as their performance gets evaluated, their work on environmental protection is considered as important as economic development. Enterprises will feel the impact more directly with different emphasis on the environment. Every penny that we could save to protect the environment, enterprises want as profit. So they naturally tend to disobey rules and regulations on environmental protection. So the local governments and environmentalists have more reasons to fulfill their obligations as a supervisor.
Do you have any sense that local officials or corporate heads are being judged by the effectiveness of their pollution control and environmental protection in any way? Has there been any impact? Because that's the only way to change behavior.
We've now clearly defined local government's responsibilities in environmental protection and ecological civilization. The party and the central government have issued documents that specify the responsibilities of leaders and party cadres in promoting ecological progress and adding value to natural resources. Such assessment indicators will guide and change the officials' behavior.
Hypothetically, and this is an impossible situation, if all the laws in place were fully complied with across all of China, it's impossible any place in the world, but assume that to be the case, what would be the negative effect on reducing the GDP?
Generally, with technological development and China's relatively large industrial scale, the cost for pollution treatment can be shared. In my view, as we introduce the reverse pressure mechanism, improving our production procedures, and innovation in production and management, the upfront investment in implementing higher standards can generate positive progress as a trade-off for increasing cost and give China greater competitiveness in the international arena. I see good prospects in there.
The 13th five-year plan sets the high goal to comprehensively build a moderately prosperous society by 2020. Essential is medium-high economic growth, roughly 6.5% annual increases in the GDP, powered by increasing domestic consumption. Key objectives are the complete elimination of extreme poverty, a significant reduction in pollution, and improving people's livelihood. The key driver is innovation in all sectors, institutional and structural, as well as technological and new products. But the road ahead is neither straight nor smooth. Interest groups opposing reform must be broken up. Industrial restructuring depends on new market-focused companies. Innovation is as much an art as a science and does not happen by command. Pollution can no longer be subservient to development. Government should be more efficient. Rule of law must be strengthened. Intellectual property rights must be protected. Most important, perhaps, people's expectations must be realistic. Moreover, China is held hostage by the vagaries of the global economy. Monitoring how China implements the 13th five-year plan gets us closer to China.